Hey my braid lovers, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Dilly. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to part perfectly for small size braids using a very simple technique of mine. This technique works great for small size braids like knotless braid, box braid, faux locs, passion twist. Typically any small size braids you're looking to get. Whether you have a slender nape or you have a wider nape, this demo will guide you on how to measure, how to part using our parting chart here on the screen, and how to know the number of small size braids per row for different head shapes and head sizes so that you get a very balanced small size braids every time. First, let's talk about measuring the nape of neck. Measuring the nape of neck is very important because the length of the nape and the width of the nape determines how many rows you will be creating for the nape, and it also determines how many braids you will be creating for the nape. Before parting, the first thing I do is I always look at the nape of the neck because I'm more experienced. I'm an experienced braider, so when I look at the nape of the neck, I can tell if the client has a slender nape or if the client has a wider nape. But for our beginners in the house today, you may not really know just by looking. So my recommendation is that you measure the nape of the neck using a measuring tape. So if you want to do that, so you have to place one end right at the natural hairline at the bottom of the neck and stretch it upwards to like the back of the ear. So you're trying to get to the curve of the head, like you're trying to stretch your tape until you reach the point where the neck curves into the back of the head. This is usually the skull. This is usually where the skull starts to round out. That's about your nape height. So from where your hairline starts to like the back of your ears, like the tippy top of the back of your ears. So if that measurement is less than 3 inches, then it means that the client has a shorter nape of neck. You'll be able to only fit 3 rows for small size comfortably at the back. If the measurement is 3.5 to 4 inches or even more than 4 inches, it means that the client has a longer nape. So you'll be able to fit in 4 clean rows at the back for small size. So choosing the right number of rows at the nape is key. And another thing you have to notice, you have to also measure the width of the nape. So the width of the nape is more like ear to ear, but like the beginning of the hairline at the back. So you need to put your tape there to know what the width is like. So if the width gives you 4 inches or less, then you know that the client has a slender nape. If the width ear to ear at the back of the hairline gives you more than 4 inches, so like 5 inches or 6 inches, that would be a perfect example of a wider nape. So for wider nape and small size wider nape, you'll be doing 6 braids on the first row, and for small size slender nape, you'll be doing 4 braids for the first row. So in summary, a person can have shorter plus slender nape. In that case, you'll be creating 3 rows plus 4 braids for row 1. A person can have shorter plus wider nape. In that case, you'll be creating 3 rows plus 6 braids for row 1. For our longer nape folks, a person can have longer plus slender nape. In that case, you'll be creating 4 rows plus 4 braids for row 1. A person can also have longer plus wider nape. In that case, you'll be creating 4 rows plus 6 braids for row 1. I know you may be wondering, what does this really mean? I'm going to show you exactly what this means as we go forward in this video, so stick around. For the purpose of our demonstration, we will be using our baby girl here, Zay, who has a longer plus slender nape. The first thing you want to do is to divide the hair into a quadrant, so divide the hair into 4 sections. Then I'm creating small knotless braid. I use the edge of the comb as my measuring tool, so I go a little bit above halfway point. So the halfway point would be somewhere here, right? I would go just a tad above the halfway point, but I don't go from end to end, because end to end for me is medium. So I just go a little bit above half, because when I make it half of this edge, it turns out to be very thin. So I go just a little bit above half. So you choose your spot wherever you want to go, and make sure that all the rows follow and align to that measurement. So I'm gonna go here. This may not be as neat because the hairlines are not really like human hair, but this is the closest we can get it, so I'll show you as much as I can show you. So when you do the first draft, you need to use your gel, of course, just to make sure we have the same measurement on the side. You can see it's just a little bit above half. This is what we have. Reparting is a way to just get your rough draft part for the whole head, and once you have it done, it will be faster to braid without making mistakes and correcting your parts and all that. So especially for beginners, if you're just starting out learning how to braid, reparting is a way to go. So if you are working on a real human head, it's literally the same method for pre-parting. So I decided to film this with the dummy head, because when we are braiding a client's hair, most times clients are not willing to sit so long for an appointment, and to actually get a detailed video like this takes time to film. So that's why we're filming this with a dummy head today. So whatever we do here also works on a real human head. So now we have our 2 rolls, 1, 2. So I'm gonna speed up the clip for our 3rd and 4th row. So now that we have 4 rows created for our longer nape of neck, we will go into creating the rows above the ears, which will be 6 rows. If we were working with a shorter nape of neck, we will create 3 rows at the back, and we would create 7 rows above the ears. But in this case, we're creating 4 rows at the back and 6 rows above the ears. Just for context of what a little bit more than half means, the edge of the comb is about 1 inch. So half is 0.5, so about 0.7. So when I say a little bit more than half, I'm talking 0.7 inch. So just for reference. So for small size knotless braid, a little bit more than half of the edge of your rat tail comb is 0.7 inch. So if you want to use your tape, that's also fine, but using the comb will be faster, especially when you're working on a client. So now I'm going to speed up the clip and create our 6 rows above the ears using our 0.7 inch measurement, or our a little bit more than half the edge of the comb I showed you. So enjoy the music while I do that, and I will see you when I get to the top of the head. Now to the 10th row. So we have 2, 1 on each side. So when you get here, you just want to make sure that the middle part is straight, of course. One tip I use for middle part when I'm creating middle part on the client is I need to stand in front of the client to create the part. Never stand behind, because standing behind, you never see the middle. You need to stand in front, literally in front of the client, and align your comb on the tip of the nose to the middle. And then when you get the middle, you just follow it through to the back, still standing in front. So when you follow it through to the back, then you can come behind and try to straighten. And of course, as you make a rough draft, you add your product. So I'm just going to show you what I usually do when I'm trying to get my middle part, because Middle part is always a problem for even experienced braiders. It's very difficult to get straight middle parts. So I add my product after I get my first rough draft from front to back, and I just clean up the parts. Hopefully you can see. Just clean it up after adding my gel comb. And another trick I use is while I'm standing behind the client's head, I have a mirror in front of me, so I look at the mirror. So I'm trying to see what the person is seeing when they look at the mirror. So you need to, after you've made the part from front to back, from the middle of the nose, then you need to come to the back and try to line it up. Use your gel, then use your mirror in front of the client and try to look at the part with the mirror. Most times you would see where it's not straight. Then after I do that, I also go to the front of the client and ask the client to look down, literally bend their head, and then I can see, because when they bend their head, I can see what is not straight. So when I've done these 3 things I mentioned, I start with the rough draft from the tip of the nose to the back, then I go to the back, I apply my gel, take 2, I try to get a cleaner draft again, and then I look at my mirror standing behind the client, looking at the line. If it's not straight enough, I go to the front of the client again, ask them to bend their head. This is the 4th thing I do, and I look at it. Some people call me a perfectionist, but I try to get middle parts, straight middle parts. It's very key. I look at it again, and when they bend their head, I can see what's not straight. I straighten it. And then the last thing I do, you may find this very funny, I ask the client to look in the mirror and check if the part is straight. Because trust me, nobody sees the middle of your head better than you yourself, the owner of the head, because if the part is not straight, you're seeing it straight up. So I usually ask. Some people may think, oh, I don't want to ask the client. They'll think that I'm inexperienced. Yes, I don't care. Let them think I'm inexperienced. But I ask because I want you to leave my chair feeling satisfied. And one way to ensure that a client likes your work is making sure that the part on their hair is just looking crisp and sharp. That's basically why I ask the client. And most times I get it right. Use my tips and thank me later. All these tips I've given you on how to do a straight middle part, please utilize it. Try it out and see if it wouldn't be your straightest middle part ever. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows in front, 1, 2, 3, 4 rows behind, making 10 rows. If we were working with the shorter nape of neck, we would create 3 rows at the nape and 7 rows above the ears, making it 10 rows for small size braids. So now that we have completely parted our 10 rows for small size, so I'm going to show you the number of braids per row using our parting chart on the screen here. I'm going to be walking you through how many braids per row you'll be creating for small size depending on the head shape and head size. And I'm also going to be using the bricklayer method to demonstrate all of this. So let's get into it. For slender nape 3 inches or less in length, which is the parting chart on the left side of our screen, and for slender nape above 3 inches in length, which is the parting chart on the right side of our screen, we will be creating 4 braids for row 1. If we were working with our wider nape folks, for wider nape 3 inches or less in length, which is the parting chart on the left hand side of the screen, and for wider nape above 3 inches in length, which is the parting chart on the right side of the screen, we would be creating 6 braids for row 1. For the second row, this is where the bricklayer parting technique comes into play. Context for those of you who may not know what the bricklayer parting technique is, it's basically a technique where you stagger the braids or the parts on the current row in between the braids or the parts on the row below. So it's more like creating a brick-like or staggered pattern for the braids, making the braids look more fuller and making the braids look more voluminous. So for slender nape 3 inches or less in length, which is on the left side of our screen, and for slender nape above 3 inches in length, which is on the right side of our screen, row 2 equals 5 braids. For our wider nape folks, wider nape 3 inches or less in length, which is the parting chart on the left side, and wider nape above 3 inches in length, which is the parting chart on the right side, row 2 equals 7 braids. As you create your parts, make sure you stagger the parts on the current row between the parts on the previous row. As you can see from here, that this second braid I created is in between the braids on the previous row. So you would continue creating your parts or your braids in this staggered pattern, making sure that all the braids on the current row falls in between the braids on the previous row to give you that very perfect professional part and professional looking small size braids. So now I'm going to speed up the clip a little bit while I walk you through our row 3 and row 4 for our different head shapes and head sizes. For slender nape 3 inches or less in length, which is on the left side, row 3 equals 6 braids, and this will be our last row for small size for this nape length. For slender nape above 3 inches in length, which is on the right side, row 3 equals 6 braids, and our row 4 would equal 7 braids. For wider nape 3 inches or less in length, which is the parting chart on the left side, our row 3 would give us 8 braids, and this would also be the last nape row for small size for this nape length. For wider nape above 3 inches in length, which is on the right side of the screen, our row 3 would give us 8 braids, and our row 4 will give us 9 braids. Now let's get into showing you how many braids for the rows above the ears. For slender nape 3 inches or less in length, which is our parting chart on the left side of the screen, our first row above the ears, which is row 4, would give us 13 braids. For slender nape above 3 inches in length, which is the parting chart on the right side of the screen, the first row above the ears, which is our row 5, would give us 14 braids. For wider nape 3 inches or less in length, which is the parting chart on the left side of our screen, our first row above the ears, which is our row 4, would give us 13 braids. For wider nape above 3 inches in length, which is the right side of the screen, our first row above the ears, which is our row 5, would give us 14 braids. So as you work your way up to the top of the head, you will need to increase the parts on each row by 1 until you get to the third to last row. So for the slender nape 3 inches or less, for the wider nape 3 inches or less, and for the wider nape above 3 inches, you need to increase the number by 1 until you get to the third to last row. So from the third to last row, you'll start reducing the number of the parts on each row by 1 until you finish creating the parts. On the other hand, for the slender nape above 3 inches, you would have to increase the number of the parts on each row by 1 until you get to the fourth to last row. From the fourth to the last row, you'll start reducing the number of the parts on each row by 1 until you finish creating the parts. In summary, for slender nape 3 inches or less, you would have a total of 114 braids for small size, and for slender nape above 3 inches, you would have a total of 100 braids for small size. For wider nape 3 inches or less, you would have a total of 120 braids for small size. And for wider nape above 3 inches, you would have a total of 116 braids. Some of you may be wondering why the longer nape folks have less braids than the shorter nape folks. This is because there are 6 rows above the ears as opposed to 7 rows for our shorter nape folks. So above the ears is where the crown of the head and the parietal ridge is, and these are the widest part of the head. So if there are less rows on the widest part of the head, the overall number of braids will be less. So that's basically why people with shorter nape have more braids on their hair in the long run than people with longer nape. So remember, based on how wide and how long your nape is, you need to adjust the number of rows at the nape and the number of rows above the ears. And you would also need to adjust how many braids to place on each row. Feel free to pause here and take a screenshot of the full parting chart, or if you prefer to have a downloaded version, the download link is in the description box. Thank you so much for watching this detailed breakdown of how to part for small size braids. Whether you're working with a slender nape or wider nape, or you have a longer nape or shorter nape, you now know how to part row by row, and you now know how many braids per row to create for small size. Remember, a clean base is everything. Make sure you measure, make sure you map out your sections correctly and part properly. This will set you up for a very neat part for small size braids every time. This same technique I taught you today works for any small size single braid you're trying to get, from knotless braids to box braids to passion twists or faux locs. Any small size braids at all, this technique I taught you today works for it. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, drop a comment below with any questions or tips of your own, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new tutorial. I would like to see your work. Tag me if you try this method on a mannequin or on a friend or on yourself. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.